All right. And with that, I think we'll get started. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the fourth webinar in our storytelling series this year. The first, though, focused on science and art. I'm Shane with my colleague Olivia, and our guests today, Irene and MJ. We'll do proper introductions in a second. But before we even get rolling, I want to get a sense of all of you. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to launch this poll. You should see a little poll pop up. Just let us know kind of how prepared you currently feel to communicate science via SciArt. And this is any sort of art. We're talking about illustrations today, but this could be quilting, crocheting, music, dance, whatever it might be. So just let us know where you're at. Also, as folks are filling that out, just some housekeeping things. If you have questions, we really hope you do. There is a questions tab button that you can type your questions in, and we will address those at the end. Oh, good question. So 1 is less experience, 5 is more experience. Sorry, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, high confidence is 5. And yeah, if you have more questions, please let us know. We'll get to those at the end. And it looks like most folks have filled this out. If you haven't, I'm going to close this in a second or two. All right. So it seems that majority of you are a little bit less than confident to share, to communicate via SciArt. That's fine. That's what you're here today for. No matter what your expertise is, no matter what your level of experience is, hopefully you'll be able to take something away from this. Okay. So just quickly, some things about us before we get started. If you're not familiar with the American Geophysical Union, where we're housed, or at least a couple of us, we're a big Earth and Space Science society. We have a bunch of journals. We do a bunch of conferences, one big one every year. Within AGU proper is the Sharing Science program, and that's the program that Olivia and myself are in. And our goal is to help scientists communicate to anyone via almost any means. And we do a lot of training and kind of hands-on support. Our bread and butter are these webinars and also more interactive, intensive workshops. We also have a ton of online resources, a very active social media account, some great resources on our website. We have a community that you can join that we'll talk about later. So just if you're interested in this type of stuff, science and art, or just any sort of communication, we can probably help. So we appreciate y'all for being here. Like I said, this is part of a larger webinar series that we're doing. So we've done a handful already. And we have recordings for these. We have additional information, animations, videos, all sorts of things. So you can go back and watch these. And so we'll throw that information in the chat at some point. We have a few coming, or a couple coming up as well. So we're doing this new series on science and art and storytelling, and we'll put the link to register for those as well. So we have this whole big series dedicated to this. Quick introductions. So I'm Shane. I'm the one obviously been talking to you, but I'm one of the AGU employees in the Sharing Science program. I'm a scientist by training, came to the science communication world through policy because I was doing conservation work. I don't do visual science art. This is not my bag. I'm very excited to be here to learn. I'm more of an audio person. So the next one we have coming up is going to be about audio and podcasting. That's my expertise. You'll hear much more from me then. Olivia, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi, I'm Olivia. I also have a science of biology background and then came into science communication through a rather circuitous route before helping develop the Sharing Science program at AGU. I do some visual art, so hence the self-portrait as an eggplant, although I would say that's the only vegetable self-portrait I've done. So I don't mean to suggest that I'm, some sort of expert in that. But also really looking forward, as always, to hearing MJ and Irene speak on this topic.
Thanks, Olivia. And so for MJ and Irene, actually, they drew animations to introduce one another that we have here. So we're actually just going to play these. First, we have MJ.
Hi, I'm MJ Riches, a PhD candidate at Colorado State University. As a kid, I spent a lot of my time split between museums and my grandpa's tree farm. I was always surrounded by art and science and nature, and I knew I'd never be able to pick just one thing to do for the rest of my life. I bounced between everything from race car driving to acting to forensic anthropology. I'd join any club I could, and I'd fill my free time by doodling relentlessly, even during class. As I entered college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to a liberal arts university, undeclared, and remained so up until the point that I had to pick. That semester, I put all of my interests, but art, into a hat and picked two, chemistry and biology. So there I was, a solid science major with a million other things in my heart. I found a research project that let me dream of the bigger world, exposing compounds in leaf waxes to ozone. I graduated, resigned myself to being an actual chemist, and headed to grad school. That's where everything changed. I found an advisor who encouraged me to take on an interdisciplinary project that allowed me to be both a chemist and a plant person. Now I get to stress plants out and analyze the good-smelling chemicals they emit. I flew under the radar for a while, doodling, knitting, and painting all at home, but my group and advisor noticed my propensity towards creating visuals and encouraged me to bring my artistic side into the sciences. I was scared at first. It was like learning to draw all over again. And I struggled finding my confidence, but it was at last year's AGU conference and because of AGU's Voices for Science program that I was encouraged to share my creations. I'm honestly still scared to share most of the time, but it's always worth it, and I can't wait to see your creations here too.
And we also have
Hi,
Irene.
I am Irene Crisologo, and I am currently doing my postdoc at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, USA. My academic journey started in the Philippines, where I studied physics and how our brain generates random numbers. And after figuring out that our brain cannot, in fact, generate truly random numbers, my interests changed a bit, and I decided to do a master's on studying how rainfall monitoring can be improved using weather radars. I then moved to Germany to do a PhD on the same topic, weather radars, then moved to the US for my postdoc. A few months into my postdoc, I was called by my supervisor into his office with a huge request. He asked me if I can stand in for a professor that got sick for a public lecture in a neighborhood bar. The audience was composed of anybody from the neighborhood who is interested in listening to scientific talks. It was my first time to do a public outreach, and I found out that I enjoyed the challenge of unboxing the scientific jargon and making science less distant to the public. I then joined AGU's Voices for Science, where I learned a lot about science communication, got to share my science art, and met people who share the same interests, like MJ. And here we are now, sharing our excitement of science art with you through this workshop.
All right. So just one more housekeeping thing before we get started. Olivia mentioned this at the top, but we encourage you all to, if you're interested in such a thing, doodle along. We'll do questions at the end, but we want this to be as, let's say, like interactive or at least kind of as enjoyable as you all can make it. So one final thing from me, and then I will cede my time. I have one more poll I want to ask you all before I hand things over to MJ is going to kick us off. So we asked about how prepared do you feel to do it, but I want to know how or have you done this before? Have you communicated via SciArt? All right. Most folks have voted. Give you all a few more seconds. All right. And so most of you, well, majority of you haven't. And that's fine as well. For those of you who have, you'll definitely get something out of this. For those of you who haven't, we're happy that you're in this webinar. So with all of that, I am going to hand things over to MJ. So MJ, take it away.
Thanks, Shane. So my SciArt origin story begins in the classroom. I was a pretty good student in college, but I always seemed horribly, horribly distracted in classes. My notes were thorough, but the margins were chock full of doodles. Doodling was my way to stay engaged with the material and process it. My brain's always worked best with visuals, so doodles have been a part of my life all the way from general chemistry to graduate level atmospheric sciences. I also realized that I communicate better with visuals. Where I'd struggled to find the words to say or write, I was able to come up with drawings that better explained my thinking. I started to incorporate images and animations in my first graduate school presentations. But I wasn't always a science artist. I liked science, I liked art, but at first it was just my way to learn new material, and while science art sounded like something of an adventure that I'd love, to be honest, I was afraid. I'm still quite afraid. There is an inherent fear of sharing your art, the vulnerability of being judged, not just for what you're saying, but how you're saying it. But as scientists, we have an obligation to share our stories. We can use science art to make science more accessible. I don't know about y'all, but I study the air. It's not the most tangible thing. Better yet, I study monoterpenes, a class of chemical compounds that leaves emit. That's 10 carbons and 16 hydrogens in any different orientation. By itself, these words are largely meaningless, but I can show you what those chemicals look like, how diverse they are in structure, how diverse they smell. In fact, when you walk into a forest and smell that pine scent, you're breathing the chemicals that I study. And then I can tell you that plants are a part of a complex feedback loop with the atmosphere. And the tiny, smelly little chemicals that leaves breathe can contribute both to global warming and global cooling. And that's when the story really starts to take shape. Science art exists firstly to inform, to teach the audience something new. But it can do so.
Oh no.
So much more to other materials. It can make you feel empowered and lead you to take action, to learn more, to engage, to vote. When done well, science art makes a difference. And that's why I share mine. It's why I face my fears and post my art online, or also why I come and talk in front of all of you. And okay, you may think that my science is important. Plants, air, climate change, that's pretty easy to sell, right? But your science is worth doing, which means that it's worth sharing. And you know what? It goes beyond that as well. It goes beyond the lab. I share stories of failure because it's important for folks to know that I make mistakes and I grow. I'm not perfect by any means. I also exist outside of the lab. So I share stories about my dog and my non-science stories to demystify the image of a frizzled-haired bench scientist. And I share my experiences with obsessive compulsive disorder and depression and imposter syndrome to improve visibility of mental health issues in academia. Some days are exceptionally difficult, but anyone can be a scientist. You have a science story, and it's worthwhile to share. But how does one actually make science art? I have a handy 3, 2, 1 tip for y'all. If I can control Shane's screen, there we go. It starts with the 3 M's. The first one being message. My messages come from my science, from classes, papers, textbooks, comments from presenters, comments from people judging my work, questions for colleagues, and sometimes direct requests from my boss or some other really, really cool scientists. Oftentimes, it's something that was said once or that I read and I still think about days later. Once I've picked my message, it's all about telling that story. I tend to break my story into sentences, and for each sentence, I make a separate panel or image. You can make more complicated science art, sure, but an image or panel per sentence is a great place to start. When in doubt, oversimplify and then build up. Then we're on to the second M, mood. I study a part of climate change, so I am sure you can imagine the range of moods for my work. I can go dark, edgy, and dire, but I do try to bring humor and hope into my work. You don't want the mood to take away from the message, but the mood here really helps to drive what your audience gets from your piece. The last M, if it will show up, there we go, is medium. Here's where I like to have fun. Play-Doh, crochet, watercolors, sketching, digital art. I had a friend who made science art with biodegradable ink on leaves as commentary on how the process of decomposition works. I've seen art science in the sand on a beach talking about rising sea levels. To be quite honest with you, my mediums are usually related to what I'm feeling like and what I physically have nearby me, but your opportunities are truly endless. So now you've picked your message, defined your mood, and chosen a medium. Now comes the hard part, actually making the art. Quick disclaimer here, I have absolutely no formal art degree. I know a guy who does, and he's verified the veracity of what I'm about to tell you, though it upsets him to no end. But you really only need to leverage 2 things in order to cheat at art. Number 1, everything is made up of shapes. If you can see the shapes that make up whatever it is you're trying to create, you can make just about anything. A monitor or house? Okay, there's a lot of rectangles and some other fun shapes, but you can get way, way more complicated. This here is a portable photosynthesis system clamped onto a leaf. But it is also a lot of rectangles and ovals. At the end of the day, it's all just various shapes of various sizes fit together and neatly aligned. The second thing you need to know to cheat at art is that all shapes are made up of points and lines. You can identify the points and lines in just about every shape. As you add more points and more lines, you can get more complicated shapes. Sometimes you make a really wonky shape, say the silhouette of a person. And that's really just a bunch of different points and a bunch of different types of lines. But if you can put a pen to paper and you can make a point, and if you can move it, you have a line. Collect a few of those together and you've got shapes. You've got your art. And this leads us to the single most important tip. Content is always so much more important than aesthetics. This goes back to the fear, right? The fear of starting because you're not an artist. The fear of sharing because it isn't good enough. At the end of the day, it's your science story that you're sharing. And that science story is worth sharing. That's the important part. This image here, it has the message. I split it up into sentences and I made each sentence a panel of a comic. I felt like a fun mood, so I added a face to the leaf and I kept the colors light. I had my tablet nearby and that was my medium. I made some points and lines and shapes and boy, does it get the job done. But here comes the all familiar fear. This is not the best thing I've made. I didn't make nice assets. I didn't spend a week making it. I took shortcuts. My tree, it is fuzzy. It is absolutely a fuzzy tree. But you know what? Even though I'm here talking about science and I'm showing you this, I'm proud of it. You don't need to spend a week on something for it to be worthwhile to share. You just need the right tools, a story, and a touch of time. So let's talk about those tools. People love to ask this, but at the end of the day, most artists use different things anyways. These are just a few bits of software that I really use. And my top tip is that when you start any new software, I highly recommend watching YouTube videos to get some tips and tricks, and to watch someone else's workflow through the program. I do enjoy each of these programs, but there is one unsung hero of SciArt, and I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with it. Microsoft PowerPoint. Yes, the program that you're watching us present on that you've probably done something with yourself. It's used to make slideshows, but has so many awesome features. You can make anything in PowerPoint. And why? Because it lets you draw shapes. It lets you edit those shapes to play with the points and lines and create any new shape. You can combine shapes to make the portable photosynthesis system or whatever cool thing of your dreams. I am working on a blog post on PowerPoint for science artists, so follow me on Twitter for more information. Oh man, this is so slow sometimes. And I do just really fast want to highlight just how amazing PowerPoint can get if you have the time for it. Like we have established, you do not need this level of art to get great science art by any means. But for those of you wondering how far you can take PowerPoint, the question is really how much time do you have? Now, obviously, not all science art is done with computer programs. I personally use a variety of tools, from stippling with Sharpies on canvas or to using a tablet or dual monitors for digital work. I also take photos of my manual drawings, but if you're looking for a digital feel like the one in the middle here, you can use a smartphone scanner app, the wonders of modern digitality, right? At the end of the day, I always fall back on good old notebooks, pens, markers, and colored pencils. Irene is going to go into a lot more detail about the technicalities, and we're happy to answer any questions. But before I'm done, I'd just like to take a moment to end my science art storyline. Over the past year, science art has taken me all over, from coast to coast, conference to classroom. I've made so many great friends, and I've still got so many great things to do. But it all started with that first step towards fear, with this first photo shared online. Yes, that was my first science art posted online, and I wasn't even the one to post it. I'm glad they did, though. We have to remember to move forward, and as in Irene's case, to move our art as well.
Thank you so much, MJ. So the wonders of technology, we have lost Irene. So I think what we're going to do, if y'all are willing, and I'm going to boot this to you, MJ, and you, Olivia, but maybe we can try to get through some of Irene's more technical stuff, if that works for the two of you. Is that
Sure.
cool? Doing this on the fly. So I'll control this as we go through. But for those of you who are with us, we suggest that you follow Irene. She has a fantastic story about how she got into this as well, kind of her SciArt journey, and been making some really fascinating and just really intricate illustrations. But Irene's, I wouldn't say maybe specialty is the wrong word, but what she's really great at are animations and creating movement, and kind of what MJ was talking about. And she has some really great tips on how to create movement. So I don't know, either if you want to maybe elaborate on some of this.
I'm happy to jump in.
Thanks, MJ.
As you said, you're not the science art physical drawn person. So as I had mentioned, that I typically tend to simplify everything into sentences, and each sentence is a frame. Animation actually really helps to bring that to life, right? Here she is taking one idea and combining several frames to show the motion behind it. So if you click Shane, it'll show you what the actual GIF looks like. Animations are just a combination of a bunch of stills, right? And so here's just 5 still images that come together to actually show movement, which better helps to inform. You don't get this level of interaction in a textbook, right? This is one of the absolute wonders of being able to share things digitally. And honestly, it's an underrepresented art form. You can go to the next slide, Shane. Kind of winging this. And you don't need anything technical to bring your sketches to life. All right, Irene is a huge, huge, huge advocate for using whatever you've got on hand, including the corner of your notebook. So if you click here, Irene has just taken, like you would have done as a kid, maybe doodles on the side of page of your notebooks, and you flip through to make a flip book, and then they combine, and you can actually, even just with a camera balanced on a water bottle, taking a peek at a notebook, create an animation there as well. And Irene created this and is a super, super cool reminder of what you have around you at any given point that can be turned into science art. I completely agree with her thinking on this. So she has the tip here to highlight only 1 or 2 action verbs. Right? Verbs are really what you're highlighting when you do an animation. You're showing that action. It is that added benefit going beyond just drawn art. For example, here she has that the sun's temperature fluctuates, and she can combine these only 3 slides, only 3 graphics to create an animation. And as a tip / sneak peek / spoiler for y'all, she did not have to recreate that background. She spent the time to create that background once and reused it throughout this animation and only changed what was important. This is called creating assets, and you can reuse those assets. You've made those, they're yours. You can actually employ them in any different number of things, right? So here, just by changing the length of a line, a red line, she's able to convey more meaning than for the image alone. So Irene also typically uses 2 primary tools. Again, highly recommend watching YouTube videos. They're the best to learn new things. Here we go again with the unsung hero, PowerPoint. You can actually make animations in there. The pros being everyone knows it. Oh no, Irene. Everyone has PowerPoint, right? Or almost everyone. It's everywhere, and it's honestly very familiar fear to many of us. The biggest con here is that it's not free. Meanwhile, she also uses something called Autodesk Sketchbook, which is free on Windows, Mac, and mobile. However, it does work best with a pen and tablet. I've seen some amazing things drawn with like fingers and with a mouse, absolutely. And if you can create shapes, you can still do just about anything. But that is a caveat to keep in mind. So actually using Autodesk Sketchbook, the pros here is that you absolutely can control and draw from scratch, right? I believe this is an image that Irene, I hope, probably drew over. And that's the benefit with something like a sketchbook, right? You can physically move your pen and pencil. It's the same as doing it on a piece of paper and then taking a bunch of photos and combining them. What with the added benefit of it being digital.
Sorry, MJ, do you want to mention layers just quickly with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So layers are a wonder that you do not get when you are doing it not digitally usually. You could, I guess, in theory. The benefit here, right? She has 1 layer for the image, the background image, and then you can do another layer so you don't disrupt whatever image was in the background. It's the same reason she was able to do that really cool sun temperature fluctuates image. You keep 1 layer completely behind everything else, right? That is something that is stagnant and something that's concrete, and you can choose to change that layer, sure, but as you add more layers to your drawings, this gives you a bit more flexibility. I overuse layers probably so that I don't accidentally erase the wrong thing. Oh, perfect. I'm glad Olivia does too. Definitely, I pretty much have a layer for anything I draw. So if I were doing this, I would have a separate layer for the face, for the mask, and for the arms. It gives you the benefit of being able to move absolutely anything here. Again, totally overuse that. But oh boy, is it a power when you do digital art. So PowerPoint, you can also actually draw in. They have their own draw function in addition to like drawing the shapes and everything.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Oh boy. This is happening with me too, Shane. It's fine.
Yeah.
So PowerPoint absolutely has a draw function that you can draw straight into it. And again, you can use a mouse for that. If you have PowerPoint on a mobile device, you can also draw straight into that. I find that a little bit more difficult. And instead, I just draw one of the shapes, the default shapes that Microsoft PowerPoint gives you, and then just squish it all over the place to make whatever it is you want. Oh, I agree. Translucent paper, beautiful. All right, Shane, new slide, please. So for actually animating your drawings, all right, you can use Sketchbook or Autodesk Sketchbook, or you can use PowerPoint to draw in the first place. You can use your corner of your notebook, absolutely. And as Irene's covered, animations are really just a bunch of images stacked on top of each other. So Autodesk Sketchbook uses this option to create a new flipbook and a new blank flipbook, and these are the steps through which you can do it and where those buttons are located. And once you have that empty flipbook, you're allowed to add new images. You can set your dimensions and frame rates and number of frames. Dimensions are important depending what you're uploading to. For example, Instagram prefers that square shape versus a YouTube video versus Twitter. Frame rate, that's how quickly your animation goes. And honestly, that is kind of a difficult part of animations that you really just play around with quite a bit. Right, so frame rate, you don't want your image to go too slow, but also you don't want it to fly by and start flashing and give everyone migraines. Number of frames, this is handy to know in advance, though I'm pretty sure Autodesk Sketchbook you can change. That'll basically plot however many pages or images you want to put on top of each other. On Autodesk Sketchbook, she's broken it up so you can see the different parts of this software. In the middle there, you've got your canvas. On the bottom, you've got your frames. Those are the different images in the canvas as they go from one to the other to the other. And to the right-hand side, then you've got your layers. So layers are in an image. They're stacked on top of each other, and frames are image to image. So they're stacked next to each other, for example, when you actually play the animation. Once you've got your flipbook, you can actually export it. And this is the super handy way to actually put it either in a GIF, for example, or you can make a movie from this as well. And here again, you can set your frame rate and size. So if you haven't actually liked what it is up for just yet, you can edit this here. Animated GIFs are nice because they repeat. So like the one here, right? It'll keep going. And you can do whatever with this. Again, here she's just created one background layer, right? The mountain with the top view. But what changes are those blue lines. This doesn't take too much artistic thought, right? You can add lines around it. And as long as you know the material, you can convey the message of air moving around that mountain. PowerPoint, also a great animating tool. Instead of having different canvases as frames, here you have your slides as frames. And again, if you've ever made PowerPoint, you're already familiar with making slides themselves. So then you click through and you've got your starting slide, and that's your first image. And then you've got your next slide, and that's your next image. And you stack these on top of each other to keep creating what your final image is. It's important to note here that, again, everything is made up of shapes. That cloud that looks really beautiful and smooth, just a bunch of circles and a well-rounded rectangle. But when you put them all together, it'll actually make a GIF. And to do this, you can go to File, Export. There's an option already there to create an animated GIF. You can time the slides, so that's basically setting up how quickly each one goes and your frame rate, if you will, and then you can create a GIF as well. And then it'll export into your final product, and you've got it forever. And you've got this motion and movement that you didn't have to have a pencil and paper, you didn't have to have a tablet in order to actually do. And you can incorporate this into your slides of your presentation. You can post it online. The places that this goes are absolutely endless. The other super duper cool thing about PowerPoint, other than everything, clearly I spend too much time on this, is that you can do screen recordings. This is fantastic for a number of reasons. One, it doesn't just record your screen on PowerPoint, it can screen record just about anything. So you can click on insert and then click on screen recording. And what'll pop up is this option, right? You can select the area of your screen you want to record. If you have dual monitor, fantastic. All you do is draw a rectangle around the area that you want to record, and then click record and wait for the countdown. PowerPoint will actually paste that recording straight on your slide, so you don't have to worry about where it lives. Then you can right click and save media as so that you can pick where it lives. And then you've got your screen recording. Also, yes, Olivia, I promise I've never been paid by PowerPoint, but
Maybe you should be. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm reconsidering that, honestly.
And I'll just add in here, if you have QuickTime Player on your computer, I know all Macs do at least, you can also do a screen recording, record your entire thing as well. So basically any software you have that does a screen recording will let you do this, but almost all of us have PowerPoint, of course. So yeah, I appreciate that we're singing the praises of something that gets derided quite often.
Honestly, it's also kind of their fault because they hide a lot of these really cool features, but that's what we're here for. Yeah, so the screen recording is also excellent because those introductions that we made, those are basically screen recordings of our drawings. And then lo and behold, you have an animation that you did not have to spend a bunch of time of, you just recorded yourself drawing. Irene does share absolutely everywhere. She does some amazing work with outreach through Skype a Scientist. She takes these images that students draw and she animates on top of them. And if that's not the wildest, coolest way to engage students, I don't know what is. She also does a lot of presentations like this one, and she's very active on social media. She often uses the hashtag SciArt, SciComm, Sketch Your Science. Highly recommend them. And I'm sad she couldn't be here with us today. But she also really wanted to highlight what the community has been able to do. So sure, you've seen us come here and talk to you and show our art, which obviously we were asked to be here for some reason or another. That would be a question for Shane and Olivia. But these are drawings that folks made during our last workshop, all right, where it was much more engaged. And we had these folks draw these animations in only a few minutes for some of these. But they were able to do a flip book on digital art using triangles as mountains because everything's a shape, to way more complicated things that involve drawing on top of some other image. And oh boy, that was very complicated, but super awesome. So it's not just us who are able to do that. Anyone can do it. And we encourage you to.
And I want to briefly just kind of talk about the larger SciArt community, which is something I can kind of talk about, not doing the illustrations thing. But before that, Irene, our other panelist, her internet dropped out. So that's why you saw Irene briefly, and then she's not here anymore. But thank you, MJ, for taking the heavy lift today. We very much appreciate your expertise. I just wanted to share something real quick before we kind of wrap this up, is that we in Sharing Science we love science and art. We think that it's an amazing mediums through which we can communicate. And we actually have a series on our blog. So we have a blog called The Plainspoken Scientist. And we have a few series. The goal is to, one, highlight the amazing work that people are doing, but two, have them talk about their creative process. And so if you are an illustrator, animator, aspiring or otherwise, if you create science music, if you create science poetry, or something that's not listed here, we want to hear from you. We want to know, we want to see your work and we want to hear about your creative process. And so we will be providing links and some follow-up emails. But if you're interested in contributing to this series, please, please, please do. And we really would love to hear from you. MJ, you wanna round us out here?
Sure. Also, I shared that to all panelists instead of everyone. I will share my list of software in a hot second. But I just wanted to highlight that together, there's a huge, huge science art community. All right. And if you don't know where to start, there's a bunch of super awesome related places.
Irene, yay!
Irene,
Say
oh
that
my
you're
goodness.
me, but you're actually you.
I'm so sorry. For some reason, everything just shut off.
Welcome back.
Thank you for winging.
So you get to see Irene, at least in her slow internet form.
I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So on the previous slide, there's options for how to get involved. Lifeology is a really, really cool network in order to learn about how they use science art in kind of like a, honestly, kind of like slideshow form in order to teach new material. Highly recommend taking a look at them. Oh, yes, thank you. They have both scientists and artists. And so if you're a scientist who doesn't really want to do art, but really likes and values science art, that's a great place. Or if you're a science artist who wants to look for some inspiration, also a fantastic place to look. ComSciCon is Communicating Science Convention. They're done nationally. And then also there's regional chapters. And it's a good way to start learning how to do this as well. And the hashtags SciArt, SciComm, and Sketch Your Science are widely used against pretty much every platform. And the nice thing there is that you can see work that's not just in their final form and like super pretty, I spent 3 months working on this, but also like our everyday science art as well. And then on the next slide, yes, thank you. Let's say you're not sure how to start, or you need a small push, or you want to work with others. That's what collaborations are for. Find another science artist that you like, and hopefully they have time. And if not, hopefully they can help you find someone else to like. And the two of you or more can actually work on a project together. There's also the option to do commissions. And this is the case, let's say you like science art, but you're not like into making it. You don't have time to make science art, or you want to support other artists. This is where you preferably pay your artists to create whatever concept you've come up with. That is a super important part there, to please value the artists, because it does take time, as you've seen. But you are welcome in this space. It's ours just as much as it's yours.
Thank you so much, MJ. So we're going to get to some of your questions in a second. If you have things to ask, specifically MJ, who's been so kind to carry the weight for us today, please put them in the questions box. But before we do, we have one more, and I swear just one more, poll for y'all. We want to get another idea of kind of where folks are at now. I know we've only had 44 minutes together, but how confident, or excuse me, how prepared do you now feel to share via SciArt? And again, 1 is the least confident, 5 is most confident. Let's just get an idea of where folks are at.
And I'll just add, while people are doing that, that we will be sharing MJ and Irene's social media information in just a moment. So you'll have that again. And we'll also be including that in the follow-up emails that you'll get. So don't panic. You will have many opportunities to connect with them, as you should.
All right, give folks a few more seconds. All right. All right, a little bit of movement. That's what I like to see. So that's great. Again, we understand that this has only been a relatively short time together, but this is just the beginning. This is not just this one-off, and we never hopefully see/hear from you again. So with that, I will let Olivia take us out.
Yeah, so first and foremost, again, here's all of their information. And MJ, again, thank you so much for covering it, for covering Irene's slides. That was really great. But I am sorry that she didn't get to share with all of you. She is having all kinds of internet issues. that she is really struggling with, and it's such a shame. So you should definitely follow her in these other media so that you can see more of what she does and connect with her that way. And if you do end up having a question that's just for her, as we get to the questions in a moment, we can pass that along to her, and maybe we'll include it in the follow-up email that we're going to send to everybody. So if you are not already a part of the Sharing Science community, please join it. It's free, it's for everyone. We don't require AGU membership. You get access to a discussion forum where you can talk with like-minded people who care about science communication in all of its forms. There are tons of resources, including a huge library of social science on science communication. So there's just a lot available for you that I really encourage you to take advantage of. You can check out our podcasts, which are another way of storytelling, this time through audio. And Shane's going to talk a lot more about that during our next webinar. One thing that I do not do at all, except in terms of speaking. So that's going to be great stuff. We do workshops also. So, obviously in the time we have here, we can just talk about things and answer some questions. But if you really want something more interactive and you think this is something that a larger group of faculty, students, peers, whomever might enjoy, get your institution to request a workshop from us. We offer them in a variety of different areas, from working with policymakers, doing multimedia, to storytelling, that's a new one, social media, and so forth. And yeah, please, follow us. All of us are pretty much on all the things, and happy to connect with everyone, both through those media and others. And with that, I think we are going to take questions. So we have our Q&A here. So these are some good questions. And MJ, if you don't, maybe I'll jump in a little too, but I'll direct most of them to you unless you get too tired. So just let us know. One that starts is, this is a very interesting one. Is it unethical to use Canva to create art?
I'm not particularly well knowledged in Canva, but my understanding is that it helps you do stuff. Here's the thing, even PowerPoint has the option to do icons, for example, and there's a couple things with using other folks' assets. For one, always ask if you know their information. Obviously, there's like stock images and stuff that you can pay to use, and at least then the author gets something out of that. As far as what's ethical, you get into sort of a questionable zone there, right? I can use icons in PowerPoint as long as I'm not actually getting paid for what I make from there. Some journals, for example, you have to create your art completely from scratch. If you're adding, let's say, a table of contents graphic, at the end of the day, if you can find the creator of the art and ask them, always, always, always do that. And when in doubt, avoid it. To always play it safe. But there is definitely free images online, and there's absolutely artists who are okay with it as long as they get recognition or pay.
Well, here's a good PowerPoint question, MJ. Can you recommend a link to a PowerPoint tutorial that explains how to use the animation feature or other features for those who are not very tech savvy?
Oh boy. I can definitely find one. I don't have one up for me right now, but yes, this is doable. I will also be doing a how to use PowerPoint thing blog post that'll be posted and talked about on Twitter as well. Olivia, is it possible if I include links in your follow-up email to send out? Okay, yeah, then with time I can absolutely send that.
Yeah. We have a question here. What can I do to help those with color blindness understand my SciArt?
Oh boy, here I thought I would get through a whole talk without going through this. Yes, 100%. Fun fact, this is my first talk. I haven't gone on a rant about this, and now it's not, and thank you so much. So Color Brewer, and I will post links in a hot second and in the email. Color Brewer has a bunch of just color schemes that you can use, absolutely. Coolors.co, which I will also send the link to, is this really awesome website that'll generate color palettes. And they recently introduced a feature that you can check with different levels of color blindness and different types of color blindness as well. I believe in the link to our blog post that, Olivia, you have the link for that. We also list these resources. So if you want to share that has those resources in it, absolutely highly recommend. It is an integral part of my science art making story. So please, thank you so much for asking that question.
Another question here. Are there particular audiences that you didn't expect to see connecting with SciArt and were pleasantly surprised to find that they did?
Yes, actually. I've done a presentation to some folks in the NRA before, actually, about lead leaking. And that started as the most completely random happenstance. I happened to be eating and someone saw that I was a scientist and overheard a conversation I was having and asked about this. And then I went over to their entire table and kind of interrupted, but they actually seemed pretty engaged. And that was the silliest, dumbest thing, because here I was drawing SciArt on napkins to show them some things. So honestly, SciArt happens just about everywhere, and you'd be amazed the random people who seem to be thoroughly excited about it.
That's great. Wow, I did not know that. That's very cool. Okay, and if you can see these questions too, MJ, feel free to jump through, or if you want to take a second to put those color links in the chat, and I'll take another look through here. Thank you everyone for these questions. I'm seeing several questions related to people who seem interested in finding jobs in the SciArt sphere. And one thing I will say, because I do not have a job in that sphere, I just sometimes do art for my job around SciComm, which is a separate matter entirely. It helps to join societies that are related to that. So for example, the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators, which I think is beyond the US, is one place that you could join to get some more information, and they often post a lot of jobs and information about sort of starting out in that realm. So that's one suggestion there. MJ, are there others that you are familiar with or would want to recommend for people thinking about pursuing this as a career? I know you are in fact in science right now, so I don't want to like throw this on you, but if you're familiar with anything.
Honestly, I've heard a bunch of people make connections, namely through Twitter, to be quite honest, and Instagram, if you like a science artist who does happen to have this for work. But also keep in mind that there are folks who do science art as a job who work in pretty much anything, right? Like museums, for example. Beautiful recommendation there. So I think go beyond the typical thinking that we're especially taught here in the sciences, as far as like faculty, industry, government. There's way more there. Yeah, I don't have too many recommendations. I'm not there.
But yeah, I agree with MJ, finding those places. So again, finding places like the Guild of Natural Science Illustrators, various medical illustrators, and so on have member societies essentially that you can become a part of to learn more about all of that if that's something you're really interested in switching into as a career. But also social media is just full of opportunities in this realm.
Olivia, do you mind if I answer a question that was just posted to chat?
Please do.
So the question is, do you experience much negative feedback from people in the science world that are not artistic / interested in art, and how do you respond to that? I have in the past, especially when I started animating my slides. That seemed very confusing for folks, and some folks are vehemently against animations on slides. To be quite honest, it helps to have like a cheerleader for you, or someone you can look up to who will verify that you know it's good to do these things. It's good to add art to science. It's good to explore this, to animate particularly some of the more difficult concepts. And so for me, when I was starting out, that was my advisor who was like, no, absolutely add animations to this. I was like, oh, thank goodness. So I think the hardest part of that isn't what the other folks say. It's more how you digest what other folks say, especially if you're in a realm of academia where it's like very traditional science. You might very well be the first person talking about this in your department or pushing for this in your department, and that can be really scary and hard on yourself. but I definitely relied more on the community to get through that and finding scientists to actually take what I've said. And so for my group, I do group meeting presentations on how to do this, and watching them add animations or drawings into their science makes me realize that however old-fashioned and traditional academia, is usually thought of, or science is usually thought of, anyone can learn. And at the end of the day, if people just really aren't that interested in art, okay, they'll forget about your presentation afterwards. Oh well.
To be fair, most people forget about most people's presentations.
100%.
So why not do them the way you like them? Someone had asked about photography in SciArt, and yeah, that is definitely an area as well. Certainly, Shane and I talk about that when we're doing talking about multimedia more broadly. It's a great way to share things. It's a fantastic way on a lot of social media. Our own American Geophysical Union Instagram account really encourages takeovers from scientists who are either in the field or in the lab, sort of sharing what you're doing, and having those actual photographs of what people are doing can be just a fabulous way of humanizing science. MJ, I see you also had some thoughts on it.
It's also a beautiful way to get into science art, especially if you aren't artistically inclined, because anyone can take a photo. And again, this stems back to the, oh, well, what can I take a photo of? I study air. What's cool is I study air, other people are studying the air. My group is studying air of indoor surfaces. There's a bunch of opportunities for really cool photos that will get your foot in the door and honestly build your confidence. It's the same reason you add pictures to slides and presentations, because, oh man, it's so much better to watch.
And I would add that this ties back to the idea of storytelling as well, because so much of the personal can be conveyed through photographs as well, both by including just a person doing something related to science, and also just that it's hard, I think, sometimes to remember, if you're in the science, that for people outside, they have no idea what it involves. So if you can take a picture of the instrument you use regularly, or just what your field site looks like, or your lab, that in and of itself is really exciting and illuminating to a lot of people, and it helps you tell that story and bring them in.
I have a couple quick technical ones that I can answer. Folks are asking about if they want to submit something to the blog, our art series, or otherwise, does it have to be related to AGU content, i.e. Earth and Space Science? No. The answer is no. We're just looking for folks who are doing great, in this case, just doing some sort of science and art. But in general, if you do any sort of science communication, policy, outreach in any form, it doesn't matter what your discipline is. It doesn't matter whether you're a scientist or not. We're always interested in hearing about those stories and amplifying those stories. So yes, if you are interested in such a thing, please consider submitting. Someone else also mentioned that they'd be interested in learning about kind of the process and the craft behind it, specifically related to MJ, but I can put I'm putting a link in the chat now, which is this Drawn to Geoscience series that I talked about a few minutes ago. And all of these are posts from artists in different capacities who show off their work, but also talk about how they did what they did, why they did what they did, the story behind it. And so some great inspiration there. And if you're interested, you can submit to that series. That's one of the links above. And again, for all of you, we will be following up, I'd say optimistically next week, but within the next couple of weeks, just being real, with a ton of information in here. So if you're missing something, don't worry, you will get everything in a follow-up.
Thanks, Shane. Well, we are at time. Thank you, all of you, for attending. Thank you so much, MJ, for this. This was fantastic.
Thank you, MJ.
And thank you, Irene, for making the slides and doing all the planning. And we're really sorry you couldn't do your part of it. But yeah, please do follow her and MJ, because they're both amazing.
Thank you all for coming, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank y'all. And definitely do go follow Irene. She's fantastic.
Bye, everyone.